me see whether everything works. Yep. Looks like we are live. We're live. We're live. We're live. It's another Monday, and I'm seeing Paul. So, weird. What's up, everybody? This is John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another Power Hour live stream. And as always, I'm joined by one and only the Mr. Paul Bratlovsky himself, the mastermind behind the YouTube channel Coding After 30. Again, Paul's channel is Coding After 30. How are you, Paul?
Pretty good, pretty good. A little bit chilly here in Boston, but pretty good.
And you have another set of paintings.
Yeah,
Should I ask what are those, or those
yeah,
you
yeah.
didn't get?
Those come with like the Airbnb that you're staying in. There's
Okay,
just
so
yeah, but
there's no history behind them as far
that's
as
it.
your history.
No, yeah,
Okay.
no. I just saw them for 3 days now, so that's as far as we go.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to check out some cool content, be sure to visit Paul's channel, Coding After 30. And while you're there, be sure to smash the like button and help with an algorithm. For example, he had yesterday a very cool live stream where he talked about the burnout. And one of the things that I really liked from the live stream was the fact when I think you said that. I think you came up with that. You said like, look, if once you start your journey in the development, it's kind of like walking up the escalator, right? But opposite way, where
Yes, going backwards,
the moment you stop, you're going backwards. So
back to the bottom, back
I
to the
think
bottom.
we'll have to steal it one time for for the main theme or whatever.
To be honest, like I stole that from somebody else when I used to study marketing a while ago. Because when I used to have my own business, marketing was huge. That's how you get clients. And so somebody else in the book said that quote, and I was like, man, that makes sense. It's like if you stop, you're dead. It's like you got to keep moving, you got to keep working. So
No, that was a very very good quote. Yeah, so a couple of announcements. We have a Strapi announcement. So tomorrow we'll do a special live stream, but it's technically not going to be a live stream. So essentially, we'll talk with a person from Strapi. We'll talk about the Strapi 4 and all that, and we're very very excited about that. We get to like ask a bunch of questions and everything. I know one person who's definitely very excited about that.
super duper excited. I think it's gonna be awesome.
And yeah, but we're not gonna record that, so we'll see each other again tomorrow. Yeah, I will leave as a link in the description the Twitter thread for the main themes if you want to leave the link. Let's say what kind of like theme you want, or you can like the ones that you have over there. And also a very quick announcement where essentially it's not gonna happen right now, but eventually we will move to a little bit different time because even though Paul is a like just an awesome person by just agreeing like meeting me at 11 o'clock, I want to accommodate him, and then it looks like the only time we can do is going to be Friday on 6 o'clock Pacific time. So basically that would be 9 o'clock at his time. Again, first of all, it's not going to happen right now. It's most likely going to be right after New Year or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
second, I fully understand that, for example, for Alex, he's like, that's, I don't know, 2 in the morning or whatever. So I fully understand that, you don't like, I really don't want anybody to stay up or whatever. And I really appreciate everybody who shows up. But it's unfortunately, that is the case since we're both in like each side of United States. So, we just
Yeah,
want to kind of
on the
accommodate
side of the world.
the whole situation. Weekly tips and fails. So actually, I had a different one, which is I'm going to talk about, I guess, next week. But my one this week is if you ever need to do something with a server as a front end developer, schedule your day around that because if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. So, like, long story short, I put Karina, that's my daughter, for nap at around 1 o'clock, and I know that I have like 2 hours, so I had a list of things that I need to do. And then the moment I put her to sleep, I'm like, okay, rush over to well, office, which is my bedroom here, and start working. And but then I right before I start doing stuff, I remember that I have a server basically that serves APIs to all my courses. I mean, pretty basic, just make get requests and but it helps a lot of situations where I don't need to depend on some third party APIs. I can simply set up my API, and then students can practice with React, with Gatsby, with whatever vanilla.js, how to make fetch requests. Now, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that I need to make a little small HTML tweak, and I have a pretty decent setup where essentially I just need to make the changes locally. I have the project running locally, check it whether everything works, push it up to the GitHub, and then from DigitalOcean, I just grab it there with like I just need to literally run one command: git pull and npm install. Well, sure enough, I do that. Something I've done like quite a many times, and I actually run out of the space, run out of the whatever memory on the droplet. So my entire droplet goes down. Then I'm like,
Oh
okay,
man,
I'll upgrade the size of the droplet. And once I do that, then even more stuff goes down. So long story short, 2.5 hours in, when my daughter is already up, so I'm like putting TV for her on. I barely squeeze it out, and that's one of those things where I mean, if one of my projects goes down, even John Smilga, I mean, it's not the end of the world. But like the server that's serving APIs, it kind of is because people are practicing like using that server. So I mean, there was a little bit of like Russian swear words going on for those
nice.
2 hours here. So yeah, so that's kind of my simple tip. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I always have failures, but there's so many I can't remember all of them. But one thing that I started to realize is a lot of people, they ask the question, when should I learn data structures? When should I learn, you know, testing? And what I would say, make sure you learn the basics first, like everything we talked about. And I've noticed, like in my experience, kind of progressing through web development, it'll organically come up. Like, last live stream we talked about how I learned talked about using hash tables or a basic object in JavaScript to look things up because it's faster versus using an array. And that's something I spent a lot more time reading about because there was a situation that came up. And now at work, we're working on an application that's getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. Now, like, this question of unit testing comes up. It's like now you should probably write tests, not because we have to, but just because it will make my job much easier and stuff like that. And so I realized is that don't try to solve a problem that you don't have yet. Like let's say like, oh, I need to learn data structures right away. I need to learn testing right away because coding is so hard to learn. Like when you start, that adding those additional things is just going to depress you or make you quit. So learn the basics, be able to build projects, and as you continue to build projects that require more complex solutions, you will eventually get to I need to know more data structures that I need to solve a particular problem in this project, or I need to do testing, but at least you'll know why rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it. So that's like my pro tip today. Like, don't worry, don't stress too much. Do the basics, be able to build a project yourself. And over time, you're going to learn all those things. Learning to code is a huge ocean and you can't do it like, swim it all in one step. You got to take time, you know?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's why Paul is here. I 100% no, I mean, this is an awesome point. 100% agree. Where for me, it's even the case where eventually I do want to dive into probably more into algorithms and definitely testing, but it's like you say, it's you have so much work already before that just forcing it just because seems like not probably the best approach. Now, I know that there's another argument where they say, well, yeah, but in company they ask for it. Okay, that is a separate topic probably or whatever. But in general, this kind of something that we already covered before also, where essentially you just keep moving, and instead of looking for things whatever out there, you just the immediate things that you need to do instead. That's what you're focusing. No, like awesome. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you for sharing this.
yeah. And just to add to that, because you mentioned it, in terms of like testing, like companies may ask for it, but for a lot of juniors, they won't expect you to be able to hit the ground running from the start, and they'll expect you to be like, oh, we do testing here. So when you get hired here, you're going to start learning testing. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, you need to be a master at it, because like a bunch of jobs that I worked at, you know, they do it, or we had somebody else that did it. Like I didn't have to do it. And now where I work, it's like, oh, you should probably start doing some testing just because things are getting too big. So it's like a very slow transition into it as a junior. Maybe if you're like a senior level or like a high mid level where it's a must.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Uh, After that, we have the main theme, and this week we have no course covers everything. And essentially, this is again one of those early coding tips that we recorded. Some of them saw the light of the day, and then now we're kind of remaking them one more time. And this is one of those things I get complaints. I wouldn't say all the time, but here and there. Basically, I have this usual like the course doesn't cover everything, right? So and then I get well, it doesn't cover Redux Saga or whatever. Just pick some random thing from the React ecosystem. And like kind of my response and my thinking always to that is look, like first of all, there's no course that covers everything. Such a course does not exist. And if there would be one, it would be hundreds of hours long and it would be very boring because pretty much it just really would be a repetition of the docs. To kind of give you where I stand, when I'm looking for like a course, the reasons why I'm looking for a course is so I can hit the ground running. So that's something that course should provide. Essentially, where's the documentation? Well, like what is the most important things you need to look for? Maybe there's some external documentation. Maybe it's not just the official docs. Maybe there's something else. Maybe it's an extension or whatever. So essentially, so you can save yourself a little bit of time by just not hitting those like kind of dead end points in the beginning. Now you'll still hit them, but at least you can kind of smooth your like kind of process a little bit. So that's number one, and then second uh, is to get ideas. Usually when I watch some course, I'm like, okay, ding 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 ding. Okay, you can do the CRUD operations this way. All right, so that means that I can do also something that I've been doing with different technology. So essentially, you're just getting a little bit different ideas because, like we mentioned in previous one, previous live stream, like everyone's different. Everyone brings something unique, and it's the same with the course. If that person has put in time and effort and whatever, if he or she hasn't just copied from somebody or whatever, I mean, they will have that unique experience in something, and there's always like something interesting to learn from somebody else, and that just gives you like, oh, okay, so maybe I cannot use it in like with this technology, but maybe I can apply the same approach with a different one that I'm using. That's why. And also, when I want to say about the hit the ground running, the first point, it's always easier to add to existing knowledge. So that's what I always find it funny where like once in a while I have the comment where it's like, well, I could have spent 2 hours in the docs and I would have gotten the same information. It's like, yeah, now you're saying that, but I didn't see you like going to the docs right away. So it's very easy, like once you already know like the overall picture to go like, okay, so let me find that feature, let me find this feature or whatever. So that's why courses are important. But I do want to mention something where essentially course is just the one thing. You get the course, but like more time I usually spend in a docs myself after the course or reading blog posts or maybe but even though that hasn't been the case in a long time, another like YouTube video. Maybe there's a video that explains like some little feature that you're looking for. And eventually where I'm going with this that you might need to get another course. Now, there are risks there where you don't want to just keep starting, buying courses and then never completing them. But there is this idea, like I kept saying, that each person brings something unique. Maybe one person covers more about like fetch requests or whatever in their course, and the other person covers, I don't know, how to render something in a DOM or those type of things. Now, I fully understand that there's limited time. It's not like you can all like just watch all the courses, but this plan that you'll just get, one course and you'll be done. Um, in my opinion, it's not very realistic. What do you think, Paul?
I think there's like a fine line because I have we're like now pushing like 400 courses on Udemy. It's legitimate amount of money I
Can
spent
I can I
for
add? Can I
buy a
add?
used
Can
car.
I
Yeah, go
add?
ahead.
So when I was writing that line, I was already I knew that we will have that because we have had that discussion already.
Yeah,
So yeah,
conversation many times.
yeah.
I think like what you have to do is maybe not one course, but like 3 to 5. I think you could get really really far if you, especially if you put your time in, understand like 80% of the material and make up the rest by either searching on Google or reading through the docs. Like I think constraining yourself through learning, you'll get farther. And because like the amount of courses I have now, like if I start watching them, like I probably won't finish them in the next 3 to 5 years. And that means like if let's say my goal is to get through all my courses that I bought, that's 3 to 5 years of studying that I still have to do before I get a chance to actually put that knowledge to use. So what I would say, definitely 100%, not all courses will cover all the things, but there's a big number of them that intersect where you do get like most of the stuff that you need to get started. And so like I agree with you. And the one caveat I would say is that don't do the thing that I did, thinking that an additional course is what you need to start building projects from scratch. So like, don't develop, paralysis through doing courses. Like you should have like a limit. But yeah, definitely checking and seeing other people's opinion and other sides of like the same coin. It is good. And one of the strategies that I started to do, I was like, okay, these are the courses that I'm going to commit to, like from start to finish, because like I kind of created a curriculum for me, like HTML, this course, CSS, whatever, this course, and it's like 3 to 5 courses. But then I'm like, I have 1,000 other courses that, my God, I bought him, and like I don't want it to be a waste of time. So I literally treat him like reading a book now. So like I'm not gonna code because I just don't have time to do everything, but I am going to skim through it, like read it, like speed read it, listen at 2.0 speed, and if something that I haven't encountered or it's different enough, then I'll slow down and pay attention to it. But definitely, like the more courses you buy, the longer it will take you to get a job. That's like my new rule. The more courses you have, the longer it will take you to get a job. And I stand behind it because I started coding like in my early 30s. I got my job at 39, and I got over like 400 courses. So there you go. That's my 2 cents on that for now.
No, like one thing I want to add though, I don't think I have ever completed the entire course ever.
Yeah.
The way kind of it works for me, I pick up the course, I start working on it, and then usually at some point I'm like, look, I just want to apply the knowledge by building something, like just taking whatever it's in the course and making something is what's in already in my head. Now it wasn't always the case. It was way more difficult, like you just said in the beginning, to kind of jump, that to from that course where everything is already prepared to you to whatever you want to make. But that's definitely the case right now.
Yeah, and see, like what I would say, there's like a very key thing that you said there is that at some point you want to try the thing and build the thing or apply it in your own project. And I think a lot of people maybe don't do that because they're like, oh, I'll just go to the next course and the next course. And I know a lot of people that do that a la carte type of like approach where they're like, it's a big buffet of different opinions and items, and let me just pick a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from there. But if you're not actually coding and building your own project alongside with it, that's when you get into trouble, 100%. Because this is another lesson that is, this is law. Like if I were to write the law book on learning to code, this would be one of the laws. Like courses will, teach you to learn to code, but building your own personal projects will make you understand how to code and how to get hired. Like I got to work on how the wording of that law, by the way, but that's the basic like kind of gist of it is, doing courses is not going to get you hired. It's completing your personal projects and learning through building and through suffering. And through failing. Um, and that's why I do the live stream. A lot of times, like people come in and like, "Oh, your code sucks." I'm like, "I don't care. Like, I'm trying to learn. I'm not afraid to put myself out there. I'm not afraid to publicly fail because in the process of falling down and getting up, that's where you learn the most important lessons. And oddly enough, all the lessons that I learned through self-discovery, through building my own personal project, those are the lessons I don't forget easily. There's something about that process that forces it into your long-term memory better. Like I don't know what the secret there is, but it just, in my opinion, all that stuff, like maybe because it's associated with the pain and the struggle, you just remember it. You know, like it's kind of interesting now that I think about it. So yeah, definitely got to do the work.
No, I mean, but this is like technically where the whole in like, okay, let's not use these general statements again, but essentially this is what I've noticed, that there is this constant push to maybe find, because I think that for every course it's the same thing. At some point you kind of need to not maybe force, but encourage the person to be like, look, you need to start building yourself. It's not always going to be the case that somebody builds it for you. And that's why you see these interactive platforms. That's why you see these, maybe the courses is built around maybe not just video lectures, but you can also type in a box. Now, I personally don't agree with any of those approaches, because I think you should be comfortable like doing those things, first of all, A, yourself, and B, on your own computer. Like that's,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
again, I'm not saying that I'm right. Like again, we'll come back to the same things. Like we all have preferences. That's my preference.
yeah.
It has nothing to do with platforms or anything like that.
The one thing that I will tell you is that if you don't try to build something and get stuck and struggle through it, like, and then overcome it through looking stuff to the docs, try to find resources, becoming the best Googler you can. Um, if you don't get used to that and having that be part of like normal part of your life, like then when you get hired and you go to work, like you literally did not prepare yourself for your job, because at your job, like a couple of days, like even today, like my boss called me, he's like, you got to do this thing. Like I've never done it before. Like who am I going to ask? Am I going to like I mean, I could ask, like call you and be like, hey John, like how do you solve this problem? But that's kind of cheating, you know. It's like, no, I have to make a best judgment, ask enough questions to know that I understand the problem that I'm trying to solve, and then break it down to smaller pieces. And it's literally this problem solving process where you first understand the issue that you're trying to solve, then get a kind of general understanding of what steps that you need to take. And I'll literally write it in comments, like pseudocode, like need to do this, then this needs to happen, then that needs to happen. And then I try to then write it with code. Like I'm like generalizing a lot, but I'm responsible for coming up with a solution and then making the thing work and then presenting it, and if I constantly just got used to doing tutorials and never practicing, getting stuck and like, oh well, how do I find the solution on my own? Like I would have been probably fired already. And that's why I tell people like tutorials are great and I've done my share of them, but I'm like really big at it's like you gotta apply the knowledge. You gotta apply the knowledge. Like I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'll give you a great example. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this art of Aikido, and Aikido would be, in my mind, and if you hate me, I'll fight you. I don't care. But Aikido, it's basically like amazing martial art, where it's more like a dance, where your partner does not resist you at all, and you guys move together. It's like a tutorial. When you do a tutorial, there's no resistance, there's no struggle, and that's what Aikido is. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, outside of learning the moves, when it's time to spar, it's the total opposite. Like your partner is literally trying to like,
Kill you.
yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I didn't want to say it
I
just in case
mean,
someone wants to do jujitsu, but yes, I was trying to politely murder you in class and resist you 100% of the time. And that literally teaches you how to do your move under stress. And like I'll tell you a story. I went to visit my friend. I'm walking up the stairs, and randomly someone runs out from somebody else's apartment, tackles me. We fall to the ground, and we start fighting. Like, just think about the stress level that I had to deal with at that point, because I was like, is this guy's trying to hurt me? He's not, because I don't want to hurt someone on purpose. So I had to quickly make a decision, like, is this going to be like crazy or not? How much force do I use? So I was able to kind of subdue the guy and like lock him down, and then found out there was my friend's crazy neighbor. Like he had just some trauma that he was dealing with, so he thought it was somebody else. And all that happened too quickly. But if I didn't know how to be able to do that under stress and deal with real resistance, I would have been like destroyed in that situation. And it was luckily nothing too serious, nothing too crazy. By the way, in any situation, I would probably run away from a fight. If you guys wondering, it's, live long, rather than, what was it, like, live till another day. I don't know what that saying is, but the point is that I'm trying to say you need that real experience of doing the thing under pressure. And that's exactly what's going to happen to you at your job. And so if you get too into your tutorials and you start working, it's going to be crazy. And I'll just tell you the last story. This girl who she actually did a bunch of your tutorials because I told her to do them. But she got hired, and she called me the next day. She's like, Paul, why didn't you tell me that learning to code is not the hard part? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like try to keep your job as a junior developer. She's like, that's the hard part because there's so much stress because everything they ask you, you feel like you don't know anything. And that's the divide that you have to kind of bridge, And so do those projects. That's it.
For me, like a couple of things that I want to add. First of all, I really want to get into writing the pseudocode, but I never like I always tell myself that I should, but I don't know what it is. Like it just stops in my brain, and I'm just okay. Let me just code along, and then maybe sometimes what I do, I just take a like a piece of paper and I kind of draw like little lines. I don't even write because my handwriting is really terrible, but kind of this just like putting some like drawing something on a on a paper just kind of gives me this idea what I want to do. And second, for me, like the first step, I truly, truly, truly believe that the first step in like stepping off that ledge is, at least that's what I did, is just literally um, taking some small project. Again, you're not going to recreate like whatever Netflix clone. But what I'm saying, if you have a small project, if you already built it with tutorial, try to build it yourself, right? Worst case scenario, here's what you can do. You can look up the code and then you try to build it one time, second time, and I'm not saying you'll have to do it like 50,000 times. As you're progressing, it's going to be better and better, but in the beginning, yes, you'll probably need to make this 5 times or whatever, but that will force you, like this is going to be like a little bit kind of with still with the handrails. At least you have an idea, because a lot of times when you have to start everything totally from scratch, there's like multiple things. First of all, ideas. Like one of the biggest things people say, well, what am I supposed to make, right? That's why we have talked about theme forests and all that stuff. That's number one. Second, like, okay, what is the code? And that's why kind of I always, when I create those courses, I want to make, I mean, again, it depends on technology. For example, MERN is going to be only one project. There's no way I can make like 15 small projects. It's just impossible. But in general, you make a bunch of small ones so people can first of all see like, okay, this is how I fetch data, this is how I render list, and on and on and on and on, and they can practice a little bit. And this is the guy left a tweet a few days ago. He was like, oh, I rebuilt the project basically 3 times. First time with you, then with just on my own, and whatever I think with your CSS, and then I made my own CSS. And this is what I've always said. And then once you get there, then it's gonna be much easier. You'll be already comfortable. And third one, this is totally off the topic that I want to ask you. So for you, would you still say that as far as street fighting, that jujitsu is in a way the best one because you always end up in the ground? So
It, so it's a little bit, you know, so I used to work with a lot of law enforcement, a lot of, like special op guys and stuff like that. And so, like, if you have nothing and you're like in general population, it's still the best, but with this idea of people having weapons, guns, people being crazy, there's so many people that have such a low respect for themselves that they're not going to respect you at all. So for them, like taking your life is something they don't really care about. And so the number one rule, like in terms of fighting, and like the more you fight, it's like the more you know you don't know. And so like the most important rule is like don't get into fights. Build awareness to be able to know when something is about to happen and leave. Don't try to be like, oh, I have a bad feeling, let me go find out what's going on. And so all the people that I know that are like in law enforcement, like I know this guy, like, he told me a story. He's like, I was at the restaurant with my wife. By the way, he also had he carries a gun, like, by the way, just to kind of put this in perspective, like, so he's prepared. But he was like, I was at a restaurant, I was hanging out with my wife, all of a sudden, like, I got a bad feeling, and he had his daughter with him, so they left. And then some stuff happened after the fact, But he was like, that was the best thing I could have done for myself and my family in that situation. Even though he's trained, he's been in the military, like whatever, he's just like, listen, like it's all I want to do is be safe, keep my family safe. And so the best thing you could do is develop like street, kind of common sense and awareness to know when things are about to go bad, you get the hell out. So like when I tell people about fighting, I tell them if you're already fighting, you miss like 7 to 8 to 9 steps of avoiding it altogether. And with that being said, like obviously if somebody wants to hurt you or whatever, it's not your fault. Like sometimes it just happens and it might be out of control. But like people that fight, they know that, and that's why a lot of fighters that I know are very nice. They don't want to fight. They can, and but the point is, if you're really concerned with self-defense, awareness, and all that, being prepared mentally, knowing, like I'll give you an example. Like, don't go to your ATM at 2 a.m. if you don't want to get mugged. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that is super important. I don't know if like,
Okay, but
uh,
if I rephrase the question, if someone would ask you, okay, look, like I'm a very nice person, but I still want to defend myself at certain uh like times or whatever, would you say that jujitsu is kind of the best one because like the street fights, I mean, again, I'm not a street fight expert and I'm not saying that you are or whatever, meaning like you have been in the fights, but not that you all the time start them, but would you say that jujitsu is the best one because you end up on like it's never gonna be this like kind of box kind of thing?
Yeah, so Jocko Willings, he had actually a really good video, and he's this crazy Navy SEALs dude. He has a
Yep,
podcast,
yep, yep.
check it out.
Hmm.
He talks about like martial arts, and literally he says jujitsu in terms of hand to hand is number one. And one big aspect of that, not only because all the fights go to the ground majority of the time, but also because the mental attitude and toughness that you develop over time, like it's it's hard to develop with other arts as fast. So like when people tell me like I did, like I've done taekwondo forever, I'm a black belt in taekwondo, nothing against taekwondo, but when people says to me like, like I'm like a college wrestler, or I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for, many years, or I did, boxing at a pro level, like I worry because those people, they practice their skill in a live scenario where it's, full bore 100% resistant, kind of like we were talking that earlier example, like, so those people understand, you know the reality when someone's trying to resist you and trying to fight you, and you kind of need that mental like awareness. And from people that do jujitsu, like, and everybody I know, it's like they will not stop fighting because they're hurt. They're literally going to stop fighting only because they can't. Like I even in sparring, I had someone like pop my elbow because I decided not to give up like an idiot. I should have like gave up, but I was just like, oh, it's fine. Like I could still fight with one arm, and that's the mental attitude like you develop in terms of survival, because it literally you do what it takes. But in today's world, if someone was interested in real self-defense, like I would say, like, I mean, there's so many resources, but awareness is number one. Number two, if you're going to do any hand-to-hand, like I know a lot of people like Krav Maga, I would say like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu would be like your base, and then if you're really serious, like invest in like a gun. I don't know, like it's like, because like I used to live in Hartford in Connecticut. It's a pretty bad neighborhood. And like if people want to do violence, they're gonna use a gun or a knife. No one's gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna beat you up. Like drunk people fight, you know what I mean? But people that want to hurt you, they're gonna do terrible things with like weapons and stuff like that. And so this is coming from someone who done martial arts for over like 29 years. And people ask me like, aren't you like a weapon that could, no, I could beat up hand to hand pretty much like most like average people. Like you got to like know what you're doing. But the point is, a fight and real violence are two different, like it's a two different things, you know what I mean? Like, and that's what people have to understand, is that either avoid it completely, or if you're in it, give anything you can to survive. And like I talk to so many people who like are super tough that in most cases they will leave the situation or run away. Like you have to no, like it's like you can't be a hero. It's like if you don't have like if you could run away, run away. The only time you would fight is when you can't run away. And I know we're taking this live stream to a whole different topic, but
Well,
for those of you who are interested in self-defense, like if you live in us, most of us like live in a very safe neighborhood, so we won't ever have to like fight or worry about. But like I went to Thailand, and there's some pretty interesting neighborhoods. I was like always polite, always nice, because I didn't want to piss anybody off. Because there have been many examples of foreigners talking crap to, like, if you're out of the country, just because you're American doesn't make you special. People have to understand that. And so there's a lot of people like who would go to bars and try to hit on women, and then they get stabbed, and then they ask why. It's like, you're in another country, you're acting like a jerk. What do you think is going to happen? So have some common sense, be a good person, unless you go into like dangerous places where you're like, yeah, whatever.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
the reason why I'm asking is because I have noticed that, I mean, I don't know every developer out there, but first of all, in my gym, there's a bunch of developers. And in general, I've noticed, like when I read like few blogs where people openly say like they like jujitsu, because for me, like I was telling you, like it just, the moment I went there within first week, I realized that there's so many things exactly like coding, right? We can
yeah,
we can make the whole main theme how
yeah, yeah.
jujitsu is like, and that's why I fully believe that that's why you thrive, because like in coding, because you're already familiar with challenges that you
Yeah,
faced over there. So
yeah, I think like in terms of the cerebral like kind of thought process that goes into doing jujitsu and coding, it's identical. So like that's why, like you said, a lot of programmers or create like people do jujitsu because it kind of hits that same brain pathways where you're like, oh, it's kind of like it's the same. And so exactly the same way you would get good at jujitsu is the same way you get good at coding, or vice versa, 100%. Um, you know, but those people, they do jujitsu for the mental kind of engagement, just like the way people do coding. So you know like because we did talk about like being good at fights, you'll be good at jiu-jitsu, you'll be at coding, but you're not going to be good at violence. You know what I mean? And that's why I tell people, like, when you ask that question, I was like, you know especially if there's like young viewers watching, it's like best thing you could do is just not get into fights, not get in trouble. And you know Jack Willing says it's like if you get into a fight and you hit someone in the head by accident and they fall down and die, you're going to jail. Like, and ruin. Like, why put yourself in those situations? So, but for coding and jujitsu, yeah, 100%.
yeah, actually, I want to read the book that you suggested by Chaco, but
Yes, really good, really good.
I think I'm gonna start next week or a week
Yeah,
after that. Basically, when I'll start going back to jiu-jitsu, I drive in the mornings, and then I have that 1 hour to kind of listen to the stuff. So yeah, I really want to read the book that you suggested. We have actually have a well, controversial question here, and I will definitely involve you here because so you want me to start?
yeah, go ahead.
Dev Mentor Live says MongoDB is not a real database. He says Postgres, whatever, SQL is more reliable and practical. What do you guys think? So, I that's Mark, right? Dev Mentor
Yeah,
Live.
yeah, Mark, yeah, he's a
Okay,
good
yeah,
guy.
that,
I
that's
like
what
him. I
that's
had
what I
him
was
on
thinking.
my podcast. It was the best. We had some very passionate disagreements. If you guys ever want to catch it, it's hilarious.
No, I watched I don't I didn't watch the entire thing, but I watched like half of it. Some of it I agreed, and some of it I disagreed. But this
Yeah,
is the same case where we talked about last week. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to agree with
yeah, with
everyone.
you, yeah, with
You
everybody
can,
else.
like, person can have opinions, and you can have the same opinion. There's no need to start childish whatever accusations. But in general, this one, I mean, this is kind of a like very controversial, especially the way the question is structured. Like MongoDB is not a real database. No, I mean, okay, but let me ask you this. So, what about all those companies who do use it? Now, again,
Yeah,
granted, I'm not saying, of course, SQL is used way more. I understand that it's 80, whatever, 90%. But okay, what about, again, all the companies who use it, are they not serious,
yeah,
or how
exactly.
are we looking at it? And to kind of give you an idea, yes, you can make the case where, um, you know, maybe it is slower or whatever, but for your projects when you're starting up, and if you don't want to spend 9 or whatever hours on going through the SQL,
Setup, yeah.
and again, I'm not saying you shouldn't. You probably should learn the SQL, but it's the same as, like, as Paul is saying. In my opinion, it's kind of, once you're comfortable with the front end, and once you already understand how to make a basic API with Node and Express and whatever, then it's time to jump into SQL, right?
Yeah.
So then it, like, when maybe your projects already get way more complex. But if you're just building stuff that, like, you can just ship and it works, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to get into that argument, but I just disagree with, like, not a real database. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
it's not a real. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 100%. And this is where you and I actually not 100% agree because like for me, working at like a couple different companies, we all use post like SQL or some sort of SQL. So I suggest that people always start with SQL. And maybe because I'm in my 40s and because I did this to switch careers and because I don't want to waste anybody's time, knowing that most people at their jobs, their first database that they're going to work with is going to be some SQL based database just because it's more common. But to say that Mongo is not a real database or have that argument, it's not fair because it's not true. Like a lot of people use MongoDB and it is easier to get into, and it's you could have it hosted on the cloud, not a problem, and it just less work because you could literally use whatever their cloud services was it. I forgot what it's
At-
called because I haven't Atlas.
Atlas,
Yeah, yeah,
Atlas.
I haven't used it in like a while, but it is really really good. And it's like my fiance being, I like British guys, I like Russian guys. It's all the same. There's a time and place for what you want to do, and so I stopped having those type of thoughts where like, oh, Postgres is better or MongoDB is better or Firebase sucks, and like because it's not helpful at all. Because at the end of the day, you will have to learn the thing that you're using at work, regardless if you like it or not. And so, I had like a conversation with Mark, and I love Mark. Like, we have like good respect. He was on my live stream, but he was telling me how Next.js, like everybody should learn Next.js right from the start. And I made the argument that people should start with React first to get the basic kind of understanding of React, knowing that React is a library and knowing that not everything comes out of the box and you do need to use routing or whatever, or this or that, where Next.js kind of has that out of the box. So if you start with Next.js, you don't know what features are provided from this concept of React library rather versus what Next.js added. And I think it's important to know that. And again, like we could disagree or agree, like, but you can't go wrong with like, learning the thing that you need to learn for your job. And all my jobs that I had so far, they were all been React jobs and none of them used Next.js. And so for me, I'm like, yeah, that's why I keep doing React. But Next.js is great. You know, Gatsby, I guess, Angular, why? I'm just kidding. They're all good. They're all good. It's like
Oh,
instead of
Paul.
like having these
Oh,
arguments, just
Paul.
start, just
We'll
start, just start.
remember few live streams ago we
Yeah.
hit the Angular the wrong way. Uh, no, as far as Next.js, I really, again, this is going to be the case where I don't want to, like, cause some kind of unnecessary YouTube drama, but for me, I just don't see how. I don't like how you can jump. It's the same. Like, I always disagreed with, not disagreed, but like I always find it uh hard to jump without vanilla JS into React. So, like, all those things, again, remember we have talked about this many times throughout these live streams where essentially, tools help you solve some things. So when we're talking about Next.js, it's way more opinionated than typical React application. But with that, with those opinions, you get bunch of goodies already. And for me, it literally was like I don't want to tell people how and why they should do something, but it always comes down to me. At least my preference, what I went through was, look, I built the projects and whatever with just regular React, and then the moment I got to the Gatsby, and moment I got to the Next.js, it was like, oh wow, so this solves me this, and
Yeah.
this, right? But I could never imagine how would I go to that place without kind of hitting those issues in the first place in the React, and then the same thing, So I just for me it comes down to I don't see any way how you can like learn Next.js without going all the time back to React. That's and kind of like I agree with you on the SQL. It's just for me it comes down to really one thing. At least I don't know. Again, this was my experience where learning I remember when it was with SQL, it took me again. I learned it in university or whatever, but it took me a while, quite a few, I would say, you know, again weeks or whatever, just to get to some kind of okay. You
Yeah.
set up the table and
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And with the mongoose, I mean, it's really
A day.
we're
Not even
not
a
talking
day.
about
It's
and again
fast. It's
you
fast.
we can make an argument of like again how sustainable that is and whatever, but as long like seeing that and the reason why I'm covering this because Alex has pretty much question about it, so I want to
Yeah.
kind of already go into it, but it's I think that it just gives you right away this result when you have that
Yeah.
express whatever server.
And it's like the same thing. Like if someone wanted to have a full stack application, not even go like let's say the node route, they just use Firebase. It's the same reason. It's just so easy to get started, and you could have a full stack application where 80% of your work is done up front, and then you have Firebase, and then with MongoDB, Express and Node, it's just something that's a lot easier to get up and running. And like I 100%, because when I first started, all the courses that I did on Udemy, they were all, Node and Mongo, Node and Mongo, which is, and for me, and I like Mongo. Mongo is really good. And like for me, it's not that I don't like Mongo, that I don't want to learn it, is that at my job right now, we use SQL databases. So learning Mongo while I'm doing SQL stuff at work, it's kind of counter. It's like I am pulling myself in two different places. Let me tell you this: if my job right now was doing Mongo, I would be Mongo, learning Mongo, Mongo this, Mongo that. And so, what I would say to people: don't have these arguments. What's better or worse? Ask yourself this question: do you know what the most common tech stack in your area to get a job? And we talked about this before. And if you know what that is, like learn that, because you already know that this is the skills that people are hiring people for in your area. So if they say it's Mongo, learn Mongo. If they say it's SQL, learn SQL. It's like, because you could literally spend a lifetime learning to code and program by jumping from one technology to another and still never run out of things to learn. So you kind of like, that's the biggest issue with coding, is that there's way too much to learn. So you kind of force yourself into these segmentations where you're like, okay, I'm just going to focus in this one area. And that's why we had a conversation where I turned down Angular position, even though it paid more money, because I didn't want to switch to something. And it's not even that much more different, but I was like, I don't want to switch. Like, I have my focus, I have my goal, I have the technologies that I'm learning. And if somebody like asked me in my sleep, like, what are you learning right now? Like, I have an answer because I have a roadmap, and I'm just going to stick to it until there's no job for me, which I don't think is going to happen for a long time. And so that's what I would say.
It's funny you say that because today I was doing some stuff and I was just writing down just popped in my head how one of the like main themes, one of the upcoming main themes where essentially I just wrote down that it's navigating like kind of the waters of just I guess saying no to stuff, and this is maybe a little bit different than what we talked about already, but this is more like again like you're saying like sticking to whatever is the path and just trying to ignore all the noise because
Yeah,
there's more and more content out there. There's more and more opinions, more and more tools, and literally it just becomes, instead of, how usually they say, well, yeah, you should be, learning, like you're trying to get more and more resources. I think we're like hitting the age where it's the opposite, where,
yeah, it's too much.
being
Yeah, you
like
need
this is
this. Yep,
actually is
yep.
way
You need
more
that. Yep.
like beneficial to you, instead of, trying to, because there's so much out there that you need to watch out for. So Alex has one. I wonder why there are so many MERN stack courses out there, knowing that Mongo is not that used when you actually land the job. Short answer, Alex, because in order to use any of the other databases, again, you need to spend. I mean, imagine somebody trying to learn, let's say, Node and Express. In order for them to understand how the SQL works, you need to give them at least some kind of clue, right? So we're talking about extra hours of just going through the content. And again, if you take a look at the SQL courses, I mean, there's different courses out there, but you're talking about, I would say, 15 hours at least, or whatever, 10 hours. Again, we're talking about probably a lot of complex stuff, but in general, to hit the ground running. So it's always easier to be like, okay, listen, this is what you do with Mongo. This is what you do, especially if you use Mongoose, and then that's it. And to kind of to leave it off. That would be my best answer, because covering that from scratch during, let's say, MERN course, uh, I think it would be very. I wouldn't. I don't think it would be beneficial, and it would be, people wouldn't like it. To kind of give you a simple answer, it's probably
Do
just
you,
easier.
yeah, do you use Mongoose with Mongo when you
Mm,
work on it? Yeah.
mm,
So
mm.
like I'm still all 100% to Strapi, so I don't even have to worry about that. But because Strapi is number one. No, but what I would say to
Save
you,
this for tomorrow.
yeah, they know Strapi is number one, so I don't have to tell them that. But what I was going to say is when you build a MERN project, like like John said, it's much easier to get started and less issues you're going to have. So as a teaching tool, it's just much more better experience for everybody. But what I would say is you could take that same project and convert it to use SQL, and you won't have to rewrite all of it, right? And like I was asking, like, John, you use Mongoose, so uh, instead of Mongoose, you will use SQLized, and you will just change, whatever you need to do to match like the Postgres or SQL, like whatever, and you're not rewriting the whole project. You're just rewriting how you handle getting data from the database, basically,
You
and
know,
everything else basically stays the same.
you want to know something really really cool? So I
Yeah.
talked to one of the backend developers, and I'm not saying that, again, that they do it in every project or whatever. But what he showed me was the approach where, when you're setting up your server, the way you structured the controllers, basically the ones who like send back the response, you make them in a way where essentially you add the extra layer
Yeah.
where you can always, and he explicitly tell me, it's like, look, if you don't want to use Mongoose, you, in
Yeah.
this file, you actually set up different connection to the database. You set up
Right.
different, and only thing you're doing is you're just getting back the data. So that way,
Yeah.
it's totally kind of off, and you don't have to worry about, like, look, whether I'm going to go with Mongoose and whatever.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where, look, like, if you see that you will need the, and it's true, you will need, most likely, if you're going for a backend role, you will need the SQL, right? But when we're talking about Mongo, I still stick to the fact that, as far as front end developer, unless, like Paul mentioned, you go with Firebase, or you go with Strapi, or you go with something, it gives you this way of building full stack actual projects where you can start customizing your database and whatever. So
Yeah, and what's interesting thing to say, like Mongo, Postgres, ASP.NET with C Sharp, like backend, when you're writing backend code, like, because I actually did not get introduced to backend via Node. I got introduced to backend using C Sharp and ASP.NET. And there's so many concepts that are literally the same, like concept of a controller, model, if you're doing like MVC, like you have like the view, like if you're doing with React, you're just building whatever, like the API for it. But it all is the same. The only difference is like the syntax based on the language you're using, but the big concepts are the same. So after I spent, you know, at my job a long time working with C Sharp and ASP.NET, when I started learning Node, a lot of that stuff carried over. The only difference was we were just writing JavaScript code and, you know, or things that weren't like different because ASP.NET has certain tooling that you use with it. Node has certain things like Mongoose that you use with it and stuff like that. But the concept, like they carry over. So like instead of fighting over this concern, what's better, Postgres or Mern, if you spend your time and you understand Mern, I'll guarantee you that rewriting that application using SQL is going to be way easier. Like once you understand the basics of, how, you know, backends work and how to create APIs and stuff.
No, just to add to that, like this is what I'm struggling right now. So let's say eventually I'll be done with Mern, and eventually I would wanna do the pretty much the same project I can do with just Postgres. But what do I do? Do I create SQL course before that and say, hey, listen, you need to watch this? Or it's included to the course again, and then you start, weighing those opinions and decisions and whatever. Since I wouldn't want to kind of like build a project while explaining SQL.
Yeah, yeah,
That to
yeah,
me
yeah,
like
yeah,
doesn't go
yeah.
together.
You're
So
like a really nice human being. I would be like, if I did a course like that, I'd be like, stop being a chump. Just look it up on YouTube, read some docs, and like come back and do this course for me. Like that's why you're a good human being. But no, but it's true. Like Uh, so it's a very funny point you made. So whenever, like, I started working at my last job using like ASP.NET C Sharp, I constantly was Googling like SQL stuff and SQL stuff just because I didn't know it. And it was like slowing me down because it's like I would try to do some stuff and then I'm like, oh, but how would I do the thing. And then I'll be like, oh man, how do you do this in SQL? And then I'll be like, how do you do this with SQL? And ask, what the hell is like, like whatever they were using before. And it did slow me down. But at the same time, if your work requires you to do it, that's what you do. But in terms of courses and having a nice tight package that will teach all the fundamentals and the basics, doing Mern, like that's why everybody does it because it's like easier to explain the stuff, easier to set up, and as a student, there's less things that could go wrong. Um, and so like I see the reason why, and and I'm sure there are smart jobs. I'm sure there are somewhere.
yeah, that really depends on where you're at. But again, for me, it would come down to like, look, if you're really like serious about that, then switching and doing like learning the SQL and whatever, even though it might seem confusing in the beginning, like, hey, listen, why we spent on Marin and whatever, it it's not like switching your existing project to that. It's not. We're not talking about like, totally two different universes or
Yeah. By the
whatever.
way, I just want to say because Prav Jal, I can't. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. He says, "I have no CSS degree. Recently starting learning SQL. Is it a good start to enter the coding industry?" And what's interesting is, like, um, like as programmers, you have to be familiar with like databases and stuff. But at the end of the day, like at companies that you work on, there's going to be a designated like data admin who's an SQL expert. You could literally become an SQL expert and work on, backing up databases, cleaning databases, managing databases, making sure they're secure, and spend like all your life in SQL world, not even be a developer, but be like an admin and a database manager. I don't know what the proper term for them, and have a good career and make money. Like if you just wanted to go that route. So like I know it's like a standalone thing, like whatever database admin or whatever the hell they're called. But and that's what I kind of say. It's like the programming world. It's like huge that you kind of have to pick your lane and stay in it. So I didn't want to be a data admin. That's why I do JavaScript. And in my working, I just have to be familiar with using SQL. But I'm not going to be sitting in databases all day long. Reports, running all this other stuff, and doing this. But for developers, it's just picking up the basics. But I just thought it was kind of interesting because I knew somebody that went that route first. They became like an SQL expert and got a job as a data admin, and then eventually they learned some PHP and like whatever else they needed to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting as far as starting with SQL. Yeah, that would be interesting to hear that story. Yeah, so we're 1 hour in. We unfortunately didn't answer too many questions. Thank you everyone. Thank you Alex. Thank you Jake. Thank you Jason. Thank you Tammy. We have I think your boy Engine Boy was here. And yeah, thank you everyone who showed up and asked the questions and joined us. And we had an awesome time. Thank you very much to
Always fun.
Paul
Yep. No, thank
who
you, John.
stayed up till like now it's 12 o'clock where he's at. So yeah,
Yep.
really,
Yep.
really appreciate that he's coming and like appreciate his points. Awesome. Like that's why I enjoy these conversations because not because we always agree on everything, but he always brings a very unique perspective and very thoughtful perspective that he is experiencing in his job and he thinks about it. And I just like the way he puts everything together. So thank you, Paul. And you
No,
want to
thank you,
sound
John.
off?
I was glad to be here. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate all of you guys joining us and this live stream. And thank you to John. I always have and love our conversation. Even though sometimes we disagree, and but I am very happy that you, even though how much you don't appreciate Strapi as much as I do, you were able to connect with people that made Strapi, and we're going to have a stream with them that we will, see what happens and ask a lot of great questions. But I appreciate that because you could have
Not
just
to
been like,
not to pat pat myself on the back, but I did the first time when I saw the email. I was like, the first person I thought about was you, and I was like, I hope he's gonna like because I was thinking, well, that would be funny if I schedule and you're like, why?
nah, yeah, why did you do that? I don't really care. No, no, no. I mean, I don't want to like continue like going into it, but like I love like PHP and WordPress, but at the same time, I'm like, why PHP? Like, I mean, I get it. Like, wouldn't it be nicer if it was just in JavaScript and Node? And sure enough, Strapi comes out. I'm like, that's kind of like replacing, um, you know, like WordPress competitor almost. And what I like about Strapi, especially like the fact that allow you to use GraphQL, where you can only fetch the data you want, you could literally use one API to create, let's say, a React backend dashboard application. I'm just using this as an example. And then you could have a Next.js application that's like a front-facing company thing for customers. And then you could have a React Native or some sort of iPhone app, and they will all use just that one API. And to me, that's just insane, and it's kind of cool. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, but
The wild world of headless CMS.
exactly,
And as always, we sound off with a strappy note. So thank you everyone
yes, yeah,
for coming and yeah, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.
yeah.
Bye
We'll see
bye.
you guys next week. Bye bye.